If you think ancient history is just dusty books and boring lectures, wait until you hear what happened to Dr. Sarah Chen and her husband Mark Thompson during their research trip to Spain. What they discovered in a 12th century monastery would not only change everything they thought they knew about medieval history, but would also put their lives in immediate danger from forces they never imagined still existed in the modern world. Sarah had always been fascinated by medieval manuscripts. As a professor of medieval studies at Georgetown University, she had spent 15 years deciphering ancient texts, but nothing had prepared her for the discovery that would consume her life and nearly end it. Her husband Mark, a documentary filmmaker, had accompanied her to Spain to film what they thought would be a routine academic expedition. They had no idea they were about to uncover a secret that powerful people had killed to protect for over 8 centuries. The couple arrived in Salamanca on a crisp October morning in 2023. The ancient city, with its golden sandstone buildings and centuries-old university, seemed like the perfect backdrop for Sarah's research into 12th century Iberian manuscripts. She had received a grant to study recently discovered documents at the monastery of San Esteban, manuscripts that had been hidden in a sealed chamber for hundreds of years and had only recently been made accessible to scholars. Mark adjusted his camera equipment as they walked through the monastery's ancient corridors. The stones beneath their feet had been worn smooth by centuries of monks' sandals, and the air carried that distinctive scent of old parchment and incense that Sarah found intoxicating. She had always joked that she was addicted to the smell of ancient books, but as they approached the manuscript room, neither of them could have imagined how dangerous that addiction was about to become. Brother Miguel, the elderly monk who served as the monastery's librarian, greeted them with a warm smile. His English was broken but enthusiastic, and his eyes lit up when Sarah explained her research focus. "Ah, the new manuscripts," he said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "Very interesting, very, unusual. Some of the other monks, they say these documents should have stayed hidden." Sarah exchanged a glance with Mark. In her experience, when religious institutions were nervous about historical documents, it usually meant those documents contained something controversial. Little did she know that controversial would be a massive understatement for what they were about to discover. The manuscript room was a scholar's dream. Ancient wooden shelves lined the walls, filled with carefully preserved documents dating back to the monastery's founding in the 11th century. But it was the special collection that had drawn Sarah across the Atlantic. These were manuscripts that had been sealed behind a false wall during the Spanish Civil War, presumably to protect them from destruction. When renovations began in 2022, workers had discovered the hidden chamber and its precious contents. Brother Miguel led them to a secured section where the recently discovered manuscripts were housed in climate-controlled cases. "These are very special," he explained, his voice taking on an almost reverent tone. "We think they were hidden for a reason. Some contain unusual information." Sarah's academic instincts were immediately aroused. Throughout history, religious institutions had often hidden documents that challenged orthodox teachings or contained politically sensitive information. As a medieval scholar, she had encountered numerous examples of censored or suppressed texts. But as she opened the first manuscript, she realized she was looking at something far more significant than academic controversy. The document was written in a mixture of Latin and Arabic, which was not uncommon for 12th century Spanish manuscripts. The Iberian Peninsula during this period was a unique melting pot of Christian, Muslim, and Jewish cultures, and scholars often wrote in multiple languages. But as Sarah began to translate the text, her hands started to tremble. This wasn't just a religious or philosophical treatise. This was a detailed account of a conspiracy that had shaped medieval European history. Mark noticed his wife's reaction immediately. After 12 years of marriage, he could read her expressions like a book. "Sarah, what is it?" he asked, adjusting his camera to capture her reaction. He had originally planned to film a straightforward documentary about manuscript preservation, but her expression suggested they had stumbled onto something much more compelling. "Mark, you need to see this," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible in the quiet manuscript room. "This document, it's describing a network of individuals who manipulated political events across medieval Europe. It mentions specific names, dates, and locations. If this is authentic, it could rewrite everything we know about the Middle Ages." The manuscript described a secret organization that had operated across medieval Europe, influencing everything from royal successions to religious conflicts. It detailed how this group had accumulated vast wealth and political power by manipulating events from behind the scenes. Most shocking of all, It suggested that this organization had not disbanded with the end of the medieval period, but had continued to operate into the modern era. Brother Miguel had been watching Sarah's reaction with growing concern. "Dr. Chen," he said quietly, "perhaps we should discuss what you have found. There are considerations about these particular documents." Sarah looked up from the manuscript. Her mind was racing with the implications. "Brother Miguel, has anyone else seen these documents? Have any other scholars had access to them?" The elderly monk's expression grew troubled. "Yes, one other researcher, a German professor, Dr. Klaus Hoffmann. He came here 3 months ago, very interested in the same manuscripts, but he left very suddenly, in the middle of the night. He did not take his research materials or even his luggage. Very strange." Mark felt a chill run down his spine. Documentary filmmaker, he had developed instincts about when a story was taking a dangerous turn. "What happened to Dr. Hoffmann? Did he contact the monastery after he left?" "No," Brother Miguel replied, shaking his head. "We tried to reach him at his university in Berlin, but they said he had not returned. His family was very worried. But then, about a week later, his university received a letter saying he was taking an extended leave of absence. Very strange, because his wife said the handwriting did not look quite right." Sarah's academic excitement was now tempered by a growing sense of unease. She had spent her career studying historical mysteries, but this felt different. This felt dangerous. "Brother Miguel, I need to ask you something directly. Do you think these manuscripts are genuine? And do you think they might contain information that some people wouldn't want to become public?" The elderly monk looked around the manuscript room as if checking for eavesdroppers. "Dr. Chen, I have been the librarian here for 37 years. I have seen many scholars come and go, and I have learned to recognize when documents are problematic. These manuscripts, they describe things that powerful people might not want the world to know. And the way Dr. Hoffmann disappeared," he paused, crossing himself. "I think perhaps some secrets are meant to stay buried." But Sarah was a scholar, and the prospect of a major historical discovery was too compelling to ignore. "Brother Miguel, I need to continue my research. This could be one of the most important manuscript discoveries in decades. I can't just walk away from this." Mark was filming their conversation, but he was also thinking like a husband. He had seen enough thriller movies to know that when academics discovered dangerous secrets, bad things tended to happen. "Sarah, maybe we should consider Brother Miguel's concerns. If something happened to Dr. Hoffmann—" "Nothing's going to happen to us," Sarah interrupted, though her voice lacked conviction. "We're American citizens conducting legitimate academic research. This isn't a movie, Mark. This is real scholarship. And if these documents are authentic, they could revolutionize our understanding of medieval history." Brother Miguel sighed deeply. "Dr. Chen, I will help you with your research, but you must promise me to be very careful. And perhaps it would be wise not to discuss your findings with anyone outside the monastery until you are ready to publish your work safely." Over the next 3 days, Sarah immersed herself in the manuscripts while Mark filmed her research process. What they discovered was even more extraordinary than they had initially imagined. The documents didn't just describe a medieval conspiracy. They provided detailed evidence of how this organization had operated across centuries, adapting to changing political and social conditions, while maintaining their core objectives of accumulating wealth and influence. The manuscripts contained names, dates, and specific details about historical events that had been manipulated by this secretive group. They described how the organization had influenced the Crusades, manipulated royal successions, and even played a role in the rise and fall of various medieval kingdoms. Most disturbing of all, the documents suggested that this group had developed sophisticated methods for eliminating threats to their secrecy. Sarah's training as a medieval scholar allowed her to verify many of the historical details mentioned in the manuscripts. The names, dates, and locations were consistent with known historical records, but the manuscripts provided a hidden context that cast familiar events in an entirely new light. It was as if she was reading the secret history of medieval Europe, written by someone with inside knowledge of the conspiracy. Mark was documenting everything, but he was also becoming increasingly concerned about his wife's safety. Sarah had become obsessed with the manuscripts, working late into the night and barely eating. More troubling, she had begun to notice that they were being watched. On several occasions, she had spotted the same individuals near the monastery, individuals who seemed to be observing their movements. "Sarah, I think we need to talk about what we're going to do with this information," Marker said one evening as they sat in their hotel room in Salamanca. "You've made an incredible discovery, but I'm starting to worry about the consequences of making it public." Sarah looked up from her notes, her eyes bright with excitement and exhaustion. "Mark, do you understand what we've found? These manuscripts prove that major historical events were orchestrated by a secret organization that may still exist today. This is the kind of discovery that changes everything we know about history. That's exactly what I'm worried about, Mark replied. If this organization still exists, and if they're as powerful as these documents suggest, then we might be in real danger. Look what happened to Dr. Hoffman. Sarah had been trying not to think about Dr. Hoffman's mysterious disappearance, but she couldn't ignore the parallels between his research and her own. Mark, we can't just pretend we didn't find this. This is too important to suppress. I'm not suggesting we suppress it, Mark said carefully. I'm suggesting we need to be smart about how we handle it. Maybe we should contact other scholars, or journalists, or even law enforcement. If we're dealing with a conspiracy that's been operating for centuries, we need to be strategic about how we expose it. But Sarah's academic instincts were in full control. I need to finish translating these manuscripts first. There are still documents I haven't examined, and I need to understand the full scope of what we're dealing with before we decide how to proceed. The next morning, when they arrived at the monastery, Brother Miguel was waiting for them with a worried expression. Dr. Chen, I must speak with you privately. There have been inquiries about your research. Sarah felt her heart rate increase. What kind of inquiries? Yesterday evening after you left, 2 men came to the monastery. They said they were from a university in Switzerland, and they were interested in the same manuscripts you have been studying. They asked many questions about your research and wanted to know how long you would be here. Mark immediately went into protective mode. Did they give you their names? Did they show any identification? They gave names, but something about them seemed wrong. They knew too much about the manuscripts about what Dr. Hoffman had been researching, and they asked strange questions like whether you had made copies of any documents or whether you had contacted anyone about your discoveries. Sarah's mind was racing. Brother Miguel, did you tell them anything about our research? I told them you were conducting standard academic research, nothing more. But Dr. Chen, I think you should know that these men, they did not seem like scholars. They seemed like, how do you say, professionals, dangerous professionals. Mark grabbed Sarah's arm. That's it, we're leaving, today. But Sarah pulled away. Mark, we can't leave now. If these people are trying to stop this research, that proves how important it is. We need to finish what we started. Sarah, listen to yourself, Mark said, his voice rising with frustration. You're talking like this is an academic exercise. These aren't competing scholars we're dealing with. These are people who made Dr. Hoffman disappear. Brother Miguel intervened quietly. Perhaps there is a compromise. Dr. Chen, you could photograph the remaining manuscripts. Then you could continue your research safely, away from here. It was a reasonable suggestion, but Sarah was reluctant to leave without completing her examination of the documents. Every scholarly instinct told her that she was on the verge of a breakthrough that could define her career and reshape historical understanding. I need one more day, she said finally. Just one more day to photograph the remaining manuscripts and, complete my initial analysis. Then we'll leave. Mark wasn't happy with the compromise, but he knew his wife well enough to recognize when she had made up her mind. Fine, but we work quickly, and we're extra careful. And Sarah, promise me that if anything else strange happens, we leave immediately. Sarah spent that day in intense focus, photographing and making preliminary translations of the remaining manuscripts. What she discovered was even more shocking than what she had found previously. The documents didn't just describe a historical conspiracy. They provided detailed information about how the organization had evolved and adapted over centuries, maintaining its influence through changing political systems and social structures. The manuscripts described sophisticated methods for manipulating political events, controlling financial systems, and eliminating threats to the organization's secrecy. They detailed how the group had survived the fall of medieval kingdoms, adapted to the rise of nation-states, and continued to operate through the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, and into the modern era. Most disturbing of all, the documents contained specific references to contemporary events and individuals. Sarah realized she wasn't just reading about historical conspiracies, she was reading about an organization that might still be actively influencing world events in the 21st century. Mark was filming everything, but he was also keeping a constant watch for any signs of surveillance or danger. His documentary background had taught him to be observant, and he was noticing subtle signs that they were being watched. Cars that appeared repeatedly in different locations, individuals who seemed to be observing the monastery, and a general sense that their movements were being monitored. Sarah, we need to wrap this up, he said as the afternoon wore on. I'm seeing the same faces in different places and I think we're being watched. Sarah was deep in translation work, but she looked up with concern. Just give me another hour. I'm working on a document that seems to describe the organization's current structure. This could be the key to understanding how they operate today. But before she could continue, Brother Miguel rushed into the manuscript room with a panicked expression. Dr. Chen, You must leave, now. The men from yesterday, they have returned, and they are not alone. They are demanding to speak with you, and they seem very angry. Mark immediately started packing their equipment. Sarah, we're leaving. Right now. Sarah was torn between her scholarly instincts and her survival instincts. But I'm so close to a breakthrough. This document describes... Sarah, whatever it describes, it's not worth our lives. Mark interrupted. We have photographs of the most important documents. We can continue the research somewhere safe. Brother Miguel was looking increasingly distressed. Dr. Chen, these men, they are not just asking questions. They are making demands. They want to know everything you have discovered, and they want all of your research materials. I think they may be dangerous. Finally, Sarah's survival instincts overcame her academic obsession. Okay, let's go. But Brother Miguel, you must promise me that you'll protect these manuscripts. If something happens to us, make sure other scholars know about this discovery. I promise, Brother Miguel said solemnly. But please, be very careful. I fear that you have discovered something that powerful people want to keep secret. Mark and Sarah quickly gathered their equipment and research materials. As they prepared to leave through a back exit of the monastery, Brother Miguel provided them with a final warning. Dr. Chen, I suggest you do not return to your hotel. These men, they know where you are staying. Perhaps it would be wise to leave Salamanca immediately. Sarah realized that their academic research trip had transformed into something much more dangerous. As they hurried through the monastery's ancient corridors, she couldn't help but think about Dr. Hoffman and wonder what had happened to him when he had made similar discoveries. Mark was thinking more practically. We need to get to the airport and get on the first flight back to the United States. We can figure out what to do with this information once we're safely home. But as they exited the monastery through a side entrance, Sarah spotted two men in dark suits standing near their rental car. The men seemed to be waiting for them, and their posture suggested they were not academics or monastery visitors. Mark, those men by our car, Sarah whispered. I think they're the ones Brother Miguel was warning us about. Mark assessed the situation quickly. We can't get to our car. We need to find another way. Out of here. They backed away from the monastery exit and found themselves in a narrow alley between ancient stone buildings. Sarah's heart was pounding as she realized they were potentially in real danger. Her academic discovery had somehow put them in the middle of a conspiracy that was apparently still active and still dangerous. What do we do now? Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mark was thinking like a filmmaker, but also like a husband trying to protect his wife. We need to get to a public place, somewhere with lots of people, and we need to contact the American embassy. They made their way through the narrow streets of Salamanca's old town, constantly looking over their shoulders for signs of pursuit. Sarah clutched her research bag, which contained photographs and notes that she now realized might be worth killing for. As they reached the main plaza, Sarah spotted a familiar figure. Mark, look, it's Dr. Hoffman. A man who matched the description of the missing German scholar was sitting at a cafe on the edge of the plaza. He looked different from the photographs Sarah had seen, thinner, more nervous, with the appearance of someone who had been under tremendous stress. Should we approach him? Mark asked. Sarah's scholarly instincts overcame her fear. We have to. He might be able to help us understand what we're dealing with. They approached Dr. Hoffman's table cautiously. The German scholar looked up with a mixture of recognition and terror. You are Dr. Chen, he said in accented English. You must not be here. You must leave Spain immediately. Dr. Hoffman, everyone thought you had disappeared, Sarah said, sitting down across from him. What happened to you? Dr. Hoffman looked around nervously before answering. I discovered the same manuscripts you have been studying. I thought I was making the greatest academic discovery of my career, but I was wrong. I was making the greatest mistake of my life. Mark was filming the conversation, but he was also watching for any signs of danger. Dr. Hoffman, what exactly did you discover? I discovered that some secrets are protected by people who will kill to keep them secret, Dr. Hoffman replied. The manuscripts you have been studying, they describe an organization that still exists, still operates, and still eliminates threats to their secrecy. Sarah leaned forward intently. Dr. Hoffman, are you saying that this medieval conspiracy is still active? I am saying that what you think is a medieval conspiracy never ended. It evolved, adapted, and continued, and the people who control it today are just as ruthless as their medieval predecessors. Dr. Hoffman's revelation was both thrilling and terrifying to Sarah. Her academic discovery was even more significant than she had imagined, but it was also far more dangerous. Dr. Hoffman, how did you escape? Mark asked. I did not escape, Dr. Hoffman replied grimly. I was allowed to live on the condition that I would never publish my research, never discuss my discoveries, and never return to my academic career. They are watching me constantly, and now they are watching you. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Dr. Hoffman, what exactly are we dealing with? You are dealing with an organization that has accumulated wealth and power over centuries. They have influence in governments, financial institutions, and academic organizations. They have the resources to make people disappear, to suppress research, and to eliminate anyone who threatens their secrecy. Mark was beginning to understand the full scope of the danger they were facing. Dr. Hoffman, what should we do? You should leave Spain immediately. You should destroy all of your research materials, and you should never speak of what you have discovered. Dr. Hoffman's voice was filled with desperation. Dr. Chen, I know this is difficult for a scholar to accept, but some knowledge is too dangerous to possess. But Sarah's response surprised even herself. Dr. Hoffman, I can't do that. If this organization is still operating, if they're still manipulating events and eliminating threats, then people need to know about it. I can't just pretend I didn't make this discovery. Dr. Hoffman looked at her with a mixture of admiration and pity. Dr. Chen, that is exactly what I thought. That is exactly what almost got me killed. Before Sarah could respond, Mark grabbed her arm. Sarah, we need to go. Now. She looked in the direction Mark was pointing and saw the same two men in dark suits approaching the cafe. They were moving with purpose, and their attention was clearly focused on Sarah and Mark. Dr. Hoffman saw them too and immediately stood up. Dr. Chen, you must run. Do not go to your hotel. Do not go to the airport. Find another way out of Spain, and do it quickly. Sarah and Mark left the cafe and moved quickly through the crowded plaza. Sarah's mind was racing with the implications of what Dr. Hoffman had told them. Her academic discovery had put them in the middle of a conspiracy that was apparently still active and still dangerous. Mark, what are we going to do? She asked as they hurried through the crowded streets. We're going to survive, Mark replied grimly, and then we're going to figure out how to expose this conspiracy safely. They spent the next several hours moving through Salamanca, avoiding their hotel, and trying to determine the best way to leave Spain without being detected. Sarah's research bag contained photographs and notes that she now realized represented both incredible historical evidence and a potential death sentence. As evening approached, they found themselves in a small church on the outskirts of the city. Sarah was exhausted, terrified, and struggling to process what had happened to their academic research trip. Mark, I keep thinking about those manuscripts, she said as they sat in the quiet church. The information they contained could change everything we know about history. How can we just suppress that? Mark looked at his wife with concern. Sarah, how can we not suppress it? We've seen what happens to people who try to expose this conspiracy. Look at Dr. Hoffman. But Dr. Hoffman is still alive, Sarah pointed out. Maybe there's a way to expose this information without putting ourselves in danger. Sarah, listen to what you're saying. We're hiding in a church in Spain because people are trying to stop us from publishing academic research. This isn't normal academic controversy. This is life-threatening. Sarah knew Mark was right, but she couldn't shake the feeling that they had a responsibility to expose what they had discovered. Mark, what if we're the only people who can reveal this conspiracy? What if we're the only ones who can stop whatever this organization is doing? Mark sighed deeply. Sarah, we're not action heroes. We're academics. We're not equipped to take on a centuries-old conspiracy. But as they sat in the quiet church, Sarah was already formulating a plan. Mark, what if we don't try to expose the conspiracy directly? What if we just publish the historical research? We could present it as a study of medieval conspiracies without explicitly connecting it to modern events. Sarah, do you really think these people would make that distinction? If they're willing to eliminate threats to their secrecy, they're not going to care about the nuances of academic publishing. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, considering their options. Mark, I need to ask you something. If we suppress this research, if we just pretend we never made this discovery, how are we going to live with ourselves? Mark understood what his wife was asking. As a documentary filmmaker, he had always been committed to exposing important stories, even when it was difficult or dangerous. Sarah, I don't know if we can live with ourselves if we suppress this, but I also don't know if we can live at all if we don't suppress it. They spent the night in the church, taking turns keeping watch and trying to decide what to do. Sarah's research bag contained photographs and notes that represented both the greatest discovery of her academic career and a potential death sentence for both of them. As dawn approached, Mark made a decision. Sarah, I think we need to get this information to people who can protect it and us. We need to contact journalists, other scholars, maybe even law enforcement. We can't handle this alone. Sarah nodded, realizing that Mark was right. But Mark, we need to be smart about this. If this organization has the kind of influence Dr. Hoffman described, we need to be careful about who we trust. They left the church as the sun was rising and made their way to an internet cafe on the outskirts of Salamanca. Sarah began composing emails to colleagues, journalists, and institutions that might be able to help them expose the conspiracy safely. But as she was typing, Mark noticed something that made his blood run cold. "Sarah, look at this news report." On the computer screen was a news story about a car accident in Berlin. Dr. Klaus Hoffmann, described as a medieval history professor who had been on extended leave, had been killed in what appeared to be a single-car accident on a rural road outside the city. Sarah stared at the screen in shock. "Mark, this can't be a coincidence. Dr. Hoffmann was just talking to us yesterday." "Sarah, this proves that these people are still eliminating threats. Dr. Hoffmann tried to warn us and now he's dead." Sarah's hands were shaking as she realized the full scope of the danger they were facing. "Mark, we can't let them silence us too. We have to find a way to expose this conspiracy." "Sarah, look what happened to Dr. Hoffmann. Look what's happening to us. Maybe some secrets are too dangerous to reveal." But Sarah's resolve was strengthening rather than weakening. "Mark, don't you see? The fact that they killed Dr. Hoffmann proves how important this information is. If we don't expose this conspiracy, who will?" Mark was torn between his desire to protect his wife and his commitment to exposing important stories. "Sarah, if we do this, we need to do it right. We need to get this information to multiple sources simultaneously. We need to make sure it can't be suppressed, even if something happens to us." Sarah nodded, beginning to formulate a comprehensive plan. "Mark, we need to document everything. We need to create a complete record of what we've discovered, what's happened to us, and what happened to Dr. Hoffmann. We need to make sure this information survives even if we don't." They spent the next several hours creating a comprehensive digital record of their discoveries. Sarah organized her photographs and translations of the manuscripts, while Mark compiled his video footage and documentation of their experiences in Spain. They created multiple copies of everything and prepared to distribute the information to journalists, scholars, and institutions around the world. But as they were preparing to send their materials, Sarah received an email that changed everything. The message was from an anonymous sender, but it contained specific details about their research that proved the sender had intimate knowledge of their discoveries. "Dr. Chen," the email read, "you have made a remarkable discovery, but you are in grave danger. The organization you have uncovered is still active and still eliminating threats to their secrecy. However, there are those of us who believe their secrets should be revealed. If you are willing to trust us, we can help you expose this conspiracy safely. Meet us at the Cathedral of Salamanca at midnight tonight. Come alone and bring your research materials." Sarah showed the email to Mark, who was immediately suspicious. "Sarah, this could be a trap. We have no idea who sent this." "But Mark, what if it's legitimate? What if there are people who want to help us expose this conspiracy?" Mark was thinking like a filmmaker, but also like a husband trying to protect his wife. "Sarah, even if this is legitimate, meeting anonymous contacts at midnight is exactly the kind of thing that gets people killed in thriller movies. Mark, this isn't a movie. This is real life, and we need help. We can't expose this conspiracy alone." Sarah's logic was sound, but Mark's instincts were screaming that this was dangerous. "Sarah, if we're going to do this, we need to be smart about it. We need backup plans, and we need to make sure someone knows where we are." They spent the rest of the day preparing for the midnight meeting. Sarah organized her research materials and created additional copies of everything. Mark prepared his camera equipment and developed contingency plans for different scenarios. As midnight approached, they made their way to the Cathedral of Salamanca. The ancient building loomed against the night sky, its Gothic spires reaching toward the stars. Sarah carried her research bag, while Mark carried his camera equipment and maintained constant vigilance for any signs of danger. The cathedral was deserted at midnight, but as they approached the main entrance, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was a woman in her 50s, elegantly dressed, with the bearing of someone accustomed to authority. "Dr. Chen," the woman said in perfect English, "thank you for coming. My name is Elena Vasquez, and I represent a group of individuals who have been working to expose the conspiracy you have discovered." Sarah was immediately intrigued. "Ms. Vasquez, how do you know about our research?" "Dr. Chen, we have been monitoring the activities of this organization for years. We knew they were trying to suppress research into the manuscripts you have been studying, and we have been watching for scholars who might be willing to help us expose their secrets." Mark was filming the conversation, but he was also watching for any signs of danger. "Ms. Vasquez, what exactly are you proposing?" "We are proposing to help you publish your research in a way that will make it impossible for the organization to suppress. We have contacts in media organizations, academic institutions, and government agencies around the world. We can ensure that your discoveries are revealed simultaneously in multiple countries, making it impossible for the conspiracy to silence all of the sources." Sarah's academic instincts were telling her that this was exactly what they needed, but her survival instincts were warning her to be cautious. "Ms. Vasquez, how do we know we can trust you?" Elena Vasquez smiled grimly. Dr. Chen, you don't, but consider your alternatives. You can try to expose this conspiracy alone, which will almost certainly result in your death. You can suppress your research and live in fear for the rest of your lives, or you can work with us and have a chance of both surviving and exposing the truth. Mark was thinking about the practical aspects of their situation. Ms. Vasquez, what would working with you involve? It would involve providing us with copies of your research materials and allowing us to coordinate the release of information. We would ensure that your discoveries are published simultaneously in multiple countries, making it impossible for the organization to suppress all of the sources. Sarah was beginning to think that this might be their best option. Ms. Vasquez, what guarantees do we have that this plan will work? Dr. Chen, there are no guarantees in this situation, but I can tell you that our group has successfully exposed other aspects of this conspiracy over the years. We have the resources and connections necessary to make this work. Sarah looked at Mark, trying to gauge his reaction. Mark was thinking like a documentary filmmaker, but also like a husband trying to protect his wife. Ms. Vasquez, what happened to Dr. Hoffman? Elena Vasquez's expression grew grim. Dr. Hoffman was approached by our group, but he chose to try to negotiate directly with the organization. He thought he could convince them to allow him to publish his research in a limited way. As you know, that did not work out well for him. Sarah shuddered, thinking about Dr. Hoffman's fate. Ms. Vasquez, if we work with you, what are our chances of survival? Dr. Chen, if you work with us, you have a reasonable chance of survival. If you try to handle this alone, you have almost no chance of survival. The choice is yours. Sarah made her decision. Ms. Vasquez, we'll work with you, but we need guarantees that our research will be published accurately and completely. Dr. Chen, you have my word that your research will be published exactly as you have written it. Our goal is to expose the truth, not to distort it. Sarah handed over copies of her research materials to Elena Vasquez. The woman examined them briefly, her expression growing more serious as she realized the scope of what Sarah had discovered. Dr. Chen, this is even more significant than we had hoped. These documents provide detailed evidence of the organization's activities over centuries. This could be the breakthrough we have been waiting for. Mark was still filming, but he was also thinking about their immediate safety. Ms. Vasquez, what happens to us now? Now, you disappear. We will provide you with new identities and safe transportation out of Spain. You will remain in hiding until we have published your research and ensured that it is impossible for the organization to suppress it. Sarah was both excited and terrified by the prospect of going into hiding. Ms. Vasquez, how long will we need to remain hidden? Dr. Chen, that depends on how the organization responds to the publication of your research. If our plan works, you should be able to return to your normal lives within a few months. If it doesn't work, she left the sentence unfinished. Over the next several hours, Elena Vasquez and her associates helped Sarah and Mark prepare for their disappearance. They were provided with new identities, transportation, and a safe house in a remote location in Portugal. As they prepared to leave Salamanca, Sarah took one last look at the ancient city where she had made the discovery of a lifetime. Mark, do you think we're doing the right thing? Mark squeezed his wife's hand. Sarah, I think we're doing the only thing we can do. We've uncovered something that people need to know about, and we're trying to expose it in the safest way possible. Mark, I keep thinking about Dr. Hoffman. He tried to handle this alone, and look what happened to him. Sarah, we're not handling this alone. We're working with people who have experience exposing this kind of conspiracy. Sarah nodded, but she couldn't shake the feeling that they were taking an enormous risk. Mark, what if this doesn't work? What if we end up like Dr. Hoffman? Mark looked at his wife with a mixture of love and determination. Sarah, then at least we'll have tried. We'll have done everything we could to expose the truth. They left Salamanca in the early hours of the morning, traveling to a safe house in a remote village in northern Portugal. The house was isolated, surrounded by mountains and forests, and seemed like the perfect place to hide while Elena Vasquez and her associates prepared to publish their research. Sarah spent the next several weeks expanding her translations and analysis of the manuscripts. Even in hiding, she couldn't resist the urge to continue her scholarly work. The documents continued to reveal new details about the organization's activities and methods. Mark documented their experiences in hiding, creating a comprehensive record of their discoveries and the events that had led to their disappearance. He was already planning the documentary he would create about their experience, assuming they survived to tell their story. Sarah, I've been thinking about what we've learned, Mark said one evening as they sat in the safe house. This organization has been operating for centuries, adapting to changing circumstances and maintaining their influence. That suggests they're incredibly sophisticated and resilient. Mark, that's what makes this discovery so important. If they're still operating, if they're still manipulating events and eliminating threats, people need to know about it. Sarah, I agree. but it also means that exposing them is going to be incredibly dangerous. They've survived for centuries by eliminating threats to their secrecy. Sarah was quiet for a moment, considering the implications. Mark, do you think Elena Vasquez and her associates can really protect us? Mark was thinking about the practical aspects of their situation. Sarah, I think they're our best chance. They seem to have experience with this kind of conspiracy, and they have the resources and connections we need. Mark, what if they're not who they claim to be? What if they're part of the conspiracy? Mark had considered this possibility, but he had decided to trust Elena Vasquez and her associates. Sarah, if they're part of the conspiracy, then we're already dead. But if they're legitimate, then we might have a chance of both surviving and exposing the truth. Sarah nodded, realizing that they had committed themselves to a course of action that would determine whether they lived or died. Mark, I just hope we're making the right decision. 3 weeks after their arrival at the safe house, Elena Vasquez contacted them with an update. Dr. Chen, we are ready to publish your research. We have coordinated with journalists and academic institutions in 12 countries. Your discoveries will be revealed simultaneously, making it impossible for the organization to suppress all of the sources. Sarah was both excited and terrified by the prospect of publication. Ms. Vasquez, what can we expect when the information is published? Dr. Chen, we can expect the organization to respond aggressively. They will try to discredit the research, intimidate the publishers, and eliminate the sources. But if our plan works, they will not be able to suppress all of the publications. Mark was thinking about their personal safety. Ms. Vasquez, what happens to us when the research is published? Mr. Thompson, that depends on how the organization responds. If they are able to suppress most of the publications, you will remain in danger. If they are not able to suppress the publications, you should be relatively safe. Sarah was thinking about the broader implications of their research. Ms. Vasquez, what impact do you think this will have on the organization? Dr. Chen, this will be the most significant exposure of their activities in decades. If successful, it could seriously damage their ability to operate in secrecy. The publication date was set for the following week. Sarah and Mark spent the intervening time preparing for the possibility that their research would be successfully published and the possibility that it would be suppressed. Mark, I keep thinking about what this means for our lives, Sarah said as they waited for publication day. If this works, we'll be known as the scholars who exposed a centuries-old conspiracy. If it doesn't work, we'll be known as the scholars who died trying to expose it. Mark was thinking about the documentary he would create about their experience. Sarah, either way, will have done something important. Will have tried to expose a conspiracy that has been manipulating events for centuries. Mark, do you think people will believe our research? It sounds like something from a thriller novel. Mark was thinking about the evidence they had gathered. Sarah, the evidence is solid. The manuscripts are authentic, the historical details are accurate, and the connections are documented. People will have to take it seriously. On the morning of publication day, Elena Vasquez contacted them with final instructions. Dr. Chen, your research will be published in exactly 6 hours. We have coordinated releases in major newspapers, academic journals, and online platforms in 12 countries. The organization will not be able to suppress all of the sources. Sarah was nervous but excited. Ms. Vasquez, what should we expect? Dr. Chen, you should expect chaos. The organization will respond quickly and aggressively. They will try to discredit the research, intimidate the publishers, and eliminate the sources. The next few days will be critical. Mark was thinking about their immediate safety. Ms. Vasquez, should we remain in hiding? Mr. Thompson, you should remain in hiding until we can assess the organization's response. If they are able to suppress most of the publications, you will remain in danger. If they are not able to suppress the publications, you should be relatively safe. Sarah spent the hours before publication making final preparations. She organized her research materials, prepared statements for journalists, and tried to mentally prepare for the consequences of what they were about to do. Mark, I can't believe we're actually doing this, she said as they waited for the publication time. A few weeks ago, we were just academics conducting routine research. Now we're exposing a centuries-old conspiracy. Mark was filming their final preparations. Sarah, I think this is the most important thing we've ever done. If this conspiracy is real, if they're still operating, people need to know about it. At exactly noon, Sarah and Mark's research was published simultaneously in 12 countries. Major newspapers ran front-page stories about the discovery of medieval manuscripts that documented a centuries-old conspiracy. Academic journals published detailed analyses of the historical evidence. Online platforms distributed the complete research materials to millions of readers. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, the story was trending on social media platforms around the world. Journalists were calling for interviews. Historians were analyzing the evidence, and government officials were demanding investigations. But the organization's response was also immediate and aggressive. Within hours of publication, several of the news outlets that had published the research were facing legal challenges. Some journalists were receiving threats, and some academic institutions were being pressured to disavow the research. Elena Vasquez contacted Sarah and Mark with updates on the situation. Dr. Chen, the publication was successful, but the organization is responding aggressively. They are trying to discredit the research and intimidate the publishers. Sarah was monitoring the response from their safe house. Ms. Vasquez, are they succeeding? Dr. Chen, they are having some success, but they are not able to suppress all of the publications. The story is too big, and it's been distributed too widely. Markey was thinking about their long-term safety. Ms. Vasquez, what does this mean for us? Mr. Thompson, it means you are still in danger, but you are also safer than you were before. The organization can no longer operate in complete secrecy. They will be more cautious about eliminating threats because they know they are being watched. Over the next several days, the story continued to dominate international news. Historians were analyzing the evidence, investigative journalists were pursuing leads, and government officials were promising investigations. But the organization was also fighting back. Some of the journalists who had published the research were facing legal challenges, personal threats, and professional pressure. Some academic institutions were being pressured to disavow the research. Sarah was watching the developments with a mixture of excitement and concern. Mark, I'm amazed by how much attention this is getting, but I'm also worried about the people who are being threatened. Mark was thinking about the broader implications of their research. Sarah, this is exactly what we hoped would happen. The story is too big to suppress, and too many people are involved for the organization to eliminate all of the sources. Mark, but what about the people who are being threatened? Are we responsible for putting them in danger? Mark was thinking about the ethics of their decision. Sarah, we're responsible for exposing a conspiracy that has been manipulating events for centuries. If people are in danger, it's because this organization is dangerous, not because we exposed them. 1 week after publication, Elena Vasquez contacted them with a significant update. Dr. Chen, I have good news and bad news. The good news is that your research has been widely accepted by historians and has prompted several government investigations. The bad news is that the organization is still trying to eliminate sources. Sarah was concerned about the ongoing threats. Ms. Vasquez, what does this mean for our safety? Dr. Chen, it means you are safer than you were before, but you are not completely safe. The organization is more cautious about eliminating threats because they know they are being watched, but they are still dangerous. Mark was thinking about their long-term plans. Ms. Vasquez, when can we return to our normal lives? Mr. Thompson, that depends on how successful the government investigations are. If they are able to prosecute members of the organization, you will be much safer. If they are not able to prosecute anyone, you will remain in some danger. Sarah was thinking about her academic career. Ms. Vasquez, what about our professional lives? Can we return to teaching and research? Dr. Chen, you will be able to return to your professional lives, but they will be very different from what they were before. You will be known as the scholars who exposed this conspiracy, and that will bring both opportunities and challenges. 2 weeks after publication, Sarah and Mark received news that would change their lives forever. Elena Vasquez contacted them with a major development. Dr. Chen, I have extraordinary news. The government investigations have been more successful than we hoped. Investigators have been able to identify and arrest several members of the organization, including some individuals in positions of significant authority. Sarah was excited but cautious. Ms. Vasquez, what does this mean? Dr. Chen, it means that the organization's ability to operate in secrecy has been seriously damaged. They will be much more cautious about eliminating threats because they know they are being watched and investigated. Mark was thinking about their immediate safety. Ms. Vasquez, does this mean we can come out of hiding? Mr. Thompson, it means you can come out of hiding, but you will need to be cautious. The organization still exists, and they are still dangerous, but they are much weaker than they were before. Sarah was thinking about the broader implications of their research. Ms. Vasquez, what impact has this had on the organization? Dr. Chen, this has been the most significant exposure of their activities in decades. Several members have been arrested, several of their operations have been shut down, and their ability to operate in secrecy has been seriously compromised. 3 weeks after publication, Sarah and Mark returned to the United States. They were greeted by a media frenzy, with journalists wanting to interview them about their discoveries and their experiences in hiding. Sarah was overwhelmed by the attention. Mark, I never imagined it would be like this. We're being treated like celebrities. Mark was thinking about the documentary he would create about their experience. Sarah, this is the most important story of our lives. We've exposed a conspiracy that has been operating for centuries. Mark, but what about our normal lives? Can we ever go back to just being academics? Mark was thinking about their future. Sarah, I don't think we can go back to being just academics. This discovery has changed everything for us. Sarah was beginning to understand that their lives would never be the same. Mark, do you think we made the right decision? Mark looked at his wife with love and admiration. Sarah, I think we made the only decision we could make. We discovered something that people needed to know about, and we found a way to expose it safely. Mark, what about Dr. Hoffman? Do you think he would have approved of what we did? Mark was thinking about the German scholar who had died trying to expose the same conspiracy. Sarah, I think Dr. Hoffman would have been proud of what we accomplished. We succeeded where he failed. 6 months after publication, Sarah and Mark had returned to their academic careers, but their lives were completely different. Sarah was now a celebrity scholar, invited to speak at conferences around the world about her discovery. Mark had created a documentary about their experience that had won several awards and had been distributed internationally. But they were also living with the knowledge that they had exposed a conspiracy that was still dangerous, even if it was weakened. They had security precautions, and they were careful about their movements and communications. Mark, do you ever regret what we did? Sarah asked one evening as they sat in their Georgetown home. Mark was thinking about everything they had been through. Sarah, I regret that we had to go through all of this. I regret that Dr. Hoffman died. I regret that other people were threatened, but I don't regret exposing the conspiracy. Mark, what do you think the long-term impact will be? Mark was thinking about the broader implications of their research. Sarah, I think we've changed how people think about history and about the possibility of secret organizations manipulating events. We've shown that conspiracies can be real and can operate for centuries. Mark, but what about the organization itself? Do you think we've really damaged them? Mark was thinking about the government investigations and arrests. Sarah, I think we've seriously damaged their ability to operate in secrecy. They'll be much more cautious about their activities because they know they're being watched. 1 year after publication, Sarah and Mark received a final communication from Elena Vasquez. Dr. Chen, I wanted to update you on the long-term impact of your research. The government investigations have been very successful, and several high-level members of the organization have been prosecuted. More importantly, the organization's ability to operate in secrecy has been permanently damaged. Sarah was pleased but still cautious. Ms. Vasquez, does this mean we're completely safe? Dr. Chen, no one is ever completely safe from an organization like this, but you are as safe as you can reasonably expect to be. The organization is much weaker than it was before, and they are much more cautious about eliminating threats. Mark was thinking about their future. Ms. Vasquez, what about our professional lives? Can we continue our research without fear? Mr. Thompson, you can continue your research, but you should always be cautious. The organization still exists, and they are still dangerous, but they are much less capable of eliminating threats than they were before. Sarah was thinking about the broader implications of their experience. Ms. Vasquez, what advice would you give to other researchers who might discover similar conspiracies? Dr. Chen, I would advise them to be extremely cautious and to seek help from people with experience in exposing these kinds of organizations. Going alone is almost always fatal. 2 years after publication, Sarah and Mark had fully returned to their academic careers, but their lives remained forever changed by their experience. Sarah had become one of the world's leading experts on medieval conspiracies, while Mark had established himself as a documentary filmmaker specializing in historical mysteries. They had also become advocates for academic freedom and the importance of exposing dangerous conspiracies, even when it was difficult or dangerous to do so. Mark, do you think other researchers will learn from our experience? Sarah asked as they prepared for another academic conference. Mark was thinking about the impact of their story on the academic community. Sarah, I think we've shown that it's possible to expose dangerous conspiracies safely, but only if you're smart about it and if you have help from people with experience. Mark, what about Dr. Hoffman? Do you think his death was ultimately meaningful? Mark was thinking about the German scholar who had died trying to expose the same conspiracy. Sarah, I think Dr. Hoffman's death was meaningful because it showed us what not to do. His sacrifice helped us understand how dangerous this organization was and how important it was to find a safe way to expose them. Sarah nodded, understanding that their success had been built on Dr. Hoffman's failure. Mark, I hope that other researchers will learn from both Dr. Hoffman's mistake and our success. Mark squeezed his wife's hand. Sarah, I think they will. We've shown that it's possible to expose even the most dangerous conspiracies if you're smart about it and if you have help. As they prepared for the conference, Sarah reflected on everything they had experienced. Mark, when we started this research, we thought we were just studying medieval manuscripts. We had no idea we were about to expose a conspiracy that was still active after 8 centuries. Mark was thinking about the documentary he had created about their experience. Sarah, that's what makes this story so compelling. We were just ordinary academics who stumbled onto something extraordinary. Mark, but we weren't ordinary in how we responded to the discovery. We could have just walked away, like Dr. Hoffman was advised to do. Mark was thinking about the choices they had made. Sarah, we couldn't walk away because we're scholars. We're committed to exposing the truth, even when it's dangerous. Sarah smiled, understanding that their commitment to scholarship had both endangered their lives and ultimately saved them. Mark, I think that's what makes this story inspiring. We showed that ordinary people can expose extraordinary conspiracies if they're brave enough and smart enough. As they left for the conference, Sarah and Mark knew that their lives would never be completely normal again. They had exposed a conspiracy that had operated for centuries, and they had done so in a way that had permanently damaged the organization's ability to operate in secrecy. But they had also shown that it was possible for ordinary academics to expose even the most dangerous conspiracies, as long as they were smart about it and had help from people with experience. Their story had become an inspiration to researchers around the world, demonstrating that the pursuit of truth was worth almost any risk, as long as it was pursued intelligently and with proper precautions. And in the end, Sarah and Mark had not only survived their encounter with a centuries-old conspiracy, but they had also succeeded in exposing it to the world, ensuring that future generations would know about the organization's activities and would be better prepared to resist such conspiracies. The manuscripts they had discovered in that Spanish monastery had indeed changed everything they thought they knew about medieval history, but more importantly, they had changed the world's understanding of how secret organizations could operate for centuries, manipulating events and eliminating threats to their secrecy. Their discovery had proven that some conspiracies were real, that they could operate for centuries, and that they could be exposed by ordinary people who were brave enough and smart enough to do so safely. As Sarah and Mark continued their academic careers, they carried with them the knowledge that they had made one of the most important discoveries in modern history, and that they had done so in a way that had not only exposed the truth, but had also survived to tell the story. Their experience had taught them that the pursuit of truth was indeed worth almost any risk, but that it was essential to pursue that truth intelligently and with proper precautions. They had learned that even the most dangerous conspiracies could be exposed, but only by people who were smart enough to seek help from those with experience in such matters. And most importantly, they had learned that ordinary people could accomplish extraordinary things when they were committed to exposing the truth, regardless of the personal cost. Note, this story is entirely fictional. Any resemblance to real people, places, or events is purely coincidental.